No one noticed the boy at first. That was a strange thing, because in a city where everything glittered, where names were carved into glass towers and faces appeared on billboards, the boy who carried the heaviest secret walked unnoticed through the morning crowd. He stood across the street from St. Eleanor's Hospital, hands buried in the pockets of a coat far too expensive for someone who looked so tired. The automatic doors slid open and closed again and again, swallowing people whole. Doctors rushing in, families rushing out, hope arriving, hope leaving. The boy checked his watch. It was not an ordinary watch. It didn't shine. It didn't tick loudly. But every time he looked at it, his chest tightened as though the watch was not counting seconds, but stealing them. Before we continue, kindly heat the subscription button on your screen and tell us where you are watching from. Inside the hospital, on the fourth floor, his mother was dying, and the world had no idea that the boy standing there, 17 years old, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes too old for his face, was the only son of one of the richest men in America. Ethan Caldwell had grown up surrounded by everything money could buy, except time. His father, Marcus Caldwell, was a name spoken with admiration on Wall Street and fear in boardrooms. Self-made, ruthless, brilliant. The kind of billionaire who built empires from sleepless nights and broken competitors. The kind of man who believed that problems existed only until money was thrown at them hard enough. But money had failed him once. It had failed him when Ethan was 9 years old. Standing at the top of the staircase, listening to his parents argue in voices they thought were whispers. "It's just stress," Marcus had said. "It's not," his mother replied, her voice shaking. "I feel like my body is slipping away from me." She was right. That was the year doctors discovered the illness. Quiet, persistent, unforgiving. It didn't arrive dramatically. It crept in. A little weakness here. A missed step there. Smiles that lasted shorter than they used to. And slowly the woman who once danced barefoot in the kitchen became someone who needed help standing up. Marcus fought the illness like he fought the market, throwing money, experts, treatments, private specialists flown in from across the country. Nothing worked. The illness didn't care about wealth or reputation. Eventually, the fighting turned into silence. Marcus buried himself deeper into work. And Ethan. Ethan stayed. The nurse recognized Ethan now. She always did. "You're early," she said gently as she held the door open. "I didn't sleep," Ethan replied. He never lied to the nurses. They had seen too much to be fooled. The room was quiet except for the steady hum of machines. Morning light spilled through the window, resting softly on the woman lying in the bed. His mother looked smaller every day. Her hair had thinned, her cheeks had hollowed. But when she saw Ethan, her eyes still searched for his face first, as though he was the only thing anchoring her to the world. "Hey, Mom," Ethan said, forcing a smile as he took her hand. Her fingers were cold. "You came early again," she whispered. "I wanted more time." She smiled at that, a sad, knowing smile. "Time doesn't listen to what we want, sweetheart." Ethan swallowed hard. The doctor had spoken clearly the night before. There was no emergency left to treat, no miracle left to schedule, just comfort, just waiting, weeks, maybe less. Ethan nodded as though he accepted it, but inside him, something refused to agree. That afternoon, Ethan sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. The watch on his wrist felt heavier than usual, like it was reminding him of something he already knew. A man sat across from him without asking. "You look like someone who's run out of options." Ethan looked up sharply. The man was ordinary looking, middle-aged, calm, dressed like he belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. "I don't talk to strangers," Ethan said. The man smiled slightly. "Good. That means you're careful." Ethan stood to leave. "Your mother has less time than she thinks," the man continued softly, "and far less than you're pretending she has." Ethan froze. Slowly he sat back down. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely steady. The man placed something on the table. A watch, identical to the one on Ethan's wrist. "This," the man said, "is not a watch." Ethan's heart began to race. "It's a debt." They spoke for less than 10 minutes. That was all it took to change everything. The man never gave his name. He never explained where the watch came from, only what it did. "You can borrow time," he said calmly. "Not steal it, borrow it." Ethan laughed, sharp and bitter. "And the price?" The man didn't smile this time. "The borrower always pays." "How?" "In ways that make sense later." The man stood, leaving the watch behind. "You already wear one," he added, "which means someone, somewhere, once made a choice for you. Now you get to choose for someone else." Before Ethan could ask another question, the man was gone, and the watch on the table, slowly, impossibly, began to tick. That night, Ethan sat beside his mother's bed long after visiting hours ended. She slept, her breathing shallow but steady. He stared at the watch. Borrowed time. He thought of every moment she had missed, every birthday she had smiled through pain, every night she had waited for Marcus to come home. Ethan pressed his thumb against the watch's side. Nothing happened. He laughed quietly at himself. Then the machine beside his mother beeped. Once, twice. Her breathing deepened. Ethan's head snapped up. Color, just a hint, returned to her face. The watch grew warm against his skin. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "What did I do?" he whispered. The next morning, doctors were confused. Her vitals had improved, not dramatically, but undeniably. "It doesn't change the outcome," one said carefully, "but it buys time." Time. Ethan stood by the window, watching sunlight touch the city, knowing something no one else did. Time had a cost, and somehow, without knowing how, he had agreed to pay it. Far away in a glass tower overlooking the city, Marcus Caldwell signed a billion-dollar deal without reading the final page. He didn't know that while he was building empires, his son was quietly making a bargain with time itself. And the clock had started counting down. Not for the dying woman in the hospital bed, but for the boy who loved her enough to borrow what was never meant to be his. If you were given the power to borrow time for someone you love, but the price would come later, would you still press the button, not knowing what it might take from you? The first sign that something was wrong wasn't dramatic. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was forgetting. Ethan noticed it on a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary day that made extraordinary things feel impossible. He stood in the kitchen of the penthouse apartment, sunlight reflecting off marble countertops, the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. He stared at the coffee machine. He knew how to use it. He had used it 1,000 times. Yet for a long moment, his hands hovered in the air, uncertain. What comes first, he wondered. A cold ripple passed through his chest. He shook his head, laughed quietly, and pressed a button at random. The machine whirred to life, coffee poured out, and the moment passed. But the watch on his wrist grew warm. At the hospital, his mother was sitting upright for the first time in weeks. Not fully strong, but stronger. Her eyes were brighter, her voice steadier. "I dreamed last night," she said as Ethan helped her sip water. "I was young again. I was dancing." Ethan smiled, but his fingers tightened around the cup. "That's good," he said softly. The doctor pulled Ethan aside later, lowering his voice. "This doesn't make medical sense," she admitted. "We're not calling it recovery, but something has slowed." Ethan nodded like he understood. Inside, his heart pounded. The watch ticked once. Marcus Caldwell arrived that evening in a rush of cologne and impatience. He stood frozen at the doorway when he saw his wife sitting up. "What did you do?" he asked the doctor. She blinked. "Excuse me." Marcus walked closer, eyes narrowing as if the room itself were lying to him. "This doesn't happen," he said. "Not without intervention." "There has been no new treatment," the doctor replied calmly. "Sometimes the body surprises us." Marcus didn't believe in surprises. He believed in cause and effect. And when his gaze fell on Ethan, standing quietly by the window, something flickered behind his eyes. "What aren't you telling me?" Marcus asked his son. Ethan met his father's stare. "Nothing," he said. It was the first lie he had ever told him. The watch warmed again. That night, Ethan dreamed of clocks, endless rooms filled with them, grandfather clocks, wristwatches, broken clocks, all ticking out of rhythm. He stood at the center of the room, barefoot, his shadows moved along the walls. "You're spending recklessly," a voice said. Ethan turned. The man from the cafeteria stood behind him, unchanged. "I didn't agree to anything," Ethan said. The man tilted his head. "You pressed the button." "I didn't know." "No one ever does." The clocks grew louder. "What's the cost?" Ethan demanded. "Tell me now." The man stepped closer. "You won't lose what you give freely," he said. "You'll lose what you assume will always be there." Ethan woke up gasping. The watch ticked. The changes became impossible to ignore. Ethan missed an entire class period at school and couldn't remember where he'd been. He forgot the name of a teacher he'd known for years, a childhood memory, one he cherished, of his mother laughing in the rain, blurred at the edges like a photo left in the sun too long. Yet his mother, she walked, slowly, carefully, but without assistance. Nurses whispered. Doctors rechecked charts. Marcus brought in specialists, each one baffled. "This shouldn't be happening," one muttered. Marcus smiled for the first time in months. He threw money at gratitude the way he always did. Donations, gifts, promises. But at night, when he thought no one was watching, he stared at Ethan with suspicion. Ethan began avoiding mirrors. His reflection looked the same, but felt distant, like someone else was wearing his face. One afternoon, as he helped his mother walk through the hospital garden, she stopped suddenly. "Ethan," she said gently. "Yes, Mom." "You're tired." "I'm fine." She touched his cheek. Her hand felt warm, alive. "You don't have to be strong for me all the time," she said. "You're still a boy." The words struck deeper than she knew. "I'm okay," he whispered. The watch burned. That night he collapsed in his room, clutching his wrist as a sharp wave of dizziness overtook him. Images flashed behind his eyes, moments that weren't his. A woman waving goodbye at a train station, a child dropping a toy, a man watching the sun set alone. "Borrowed time carries borrowed memories," the voice whispered. Ethan screamed into his pillow, terrified someone might hear. The man returned a week later. This time he didn't sit. "You're overextending," he said calmly. "My mother is alive," Ethan snapped. "That's all that matters. For now." Ethan stood, fists clenched. "You said borrow, not destroy. And you assumed the loan was interest-free." Ethan's voice shook. "Take it back. Take the time back." The man shook his head. "Time only moves forward," and he said, "even borrowed time." "Then take it from me," Ethan said without hesitation. The man studied him for a long moment. "It already is." The breaking point came on a Sunday. Marcus arrived early to take his wife home for the first time in months. Ethan watched from the hallway as his mother laughed softly, leaning into Marcus's arm. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Ethan's vision blurred. He staggered. Marcus caught him just in time. "What's wrong with you?" Marcus demanded. Ethan tried to speak, but his words tangled. I forgot." Marcus's face hardened. "Forgot what?" Ethan looked up at him, and for a terrifying second, he couldn't remember his father's name. Silence filled the room. Marcus released him slowly. "What did you do?" Marcus whispered. Ethan said nothing. The watch ticked. That night, Ethan sat alone on the penthouse balcony, city lights flickering like distant stars. He pressed the watch against his chest, tears streaking silently down his face. He had saved her, but he was fading, piece by piece, memory by memory, time by time, and somewhere deep inside, a terrifying realization took hold. The watch wasn't counting how much time his mother had left. It was counting how much of him was still there to give. And as Ethan stared into the endless city, one question echoed in his mind. How much of yourself would you sacrifice before the person you love no longer recognizes who you are? The first time Ethan didn't recognize his own room, fear finally won. He woke up to sunlight cutting through glass walls and shadows stretching across the floor like unfamiliar strangers. For several seconds, too many seconds, he lay perfectly still, heart pounding, staring at a ceiling that felt foreign. Where am I? The thought landed hard. He sat up abruptly, breath shallow, scanning the room. The bed was large, too large. The sheets soft, untouched by time. The walls held framed photographs, moments frozen in joy. But they felt like someone else's life. Ethan swung his legs over the side of the bed, dizzy. The watch on his wrist pulsed faintly, warm and alive. "Not yet," he whispered to it. "Please, not yet." Downstairs, the penthouse buzzed with unfamiliar energy. Laughter. Real laughter. His mother's laughter. Ethan froze at the top of the stairs. She stood in the kitchen, wearing a sweater he hadn't seen her wear in years, moving slowly but confidently as she poured herself tea. Marcus stood beside her, watching like a man afraid to blink. "You should sit," Marcus said gently. "I'm not made of glass," she replied, smiling. Ethan's chest tightened. This was what he wanted. This was why he pressed the button. And yet, as he stepped forward, his mother turned and hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But Ethan saw it. Her eyes searched his face, not with confusion, but with effort. "Ethan," she said warmly, though something fragile hid beneath it. "Morning, Mom." She smiled again, but her gaze lingered, as if anchoring his features into memory. The watch ticked. School became impossible. Teachers spoke, words drifting past him like noise underwater. Friends laughed at jokes he didn't remember hearing. Names slipped through his fingers like sand. One afternoon, a boy clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "Man, you disappeared yesterday. Where'd you go?" Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He had no answer, because he didn't know. The watch burned. Marcus noticed everything. The pauses, the distant stares, the way Ethan sometimes flinched at his own reflection. "You're not well," Marcus said one night in his study, voice low and controlled. "I'm fine," Ethan replied automatically. Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "Stop lying to me." The sound echoed through the room. "I lost months with your mother because I trusted doctors and numbers," Marcus continued, eyes sharp. "I will not lose my son because he thinks silence is strength." Ethan's hands trembled. "You wouldn't understand," he said quietly. Marcus leaned back, studying him. "Then help me." Ethan met his father's gaze, and for a terrifying moment didn't know what emotion to show. Love? Fear? Resentment? They all blurred. "I can't," Ethan whispered. Marcus exhaled sharply, frustration mixing with something dangerously close to fear. "Whatever you're hiding," Marcus said, "it's costing you." Ethan thought of the watch. "It's costing me everything." The man appeared again on a rainy evening, standing beneath a streetlight as if he had always been there. "You're unraveling faster than expected," he said calmly. Ethan laughed bitterly. "Funny, you didn't seem concerned before. Borrowed time behaves differently depending on the borrower." "What does that mean?" The man looked at him carefully. "You love deeply," Ethan swallowed. "That accelerates the debt." "Then slow it down," Ethan snapped. "Take less from me." The man shook his head. "Time doesn't negotiate on," he replied. "It balances." Ethan's voice cracked. "She's starting to forget me." The man said nothing. "That wasn't part of the deal." "There was no deal," the man replied softly. "Only a choice." The forgetting spread. Ethan forgot passwords, birthdays, songs his mother used to hum while cooking. One night, his mother knocked on his bedroom door. "Can I come in?" she asked. He nodded. She sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap. "You've been distant," she said gently. "I feel like you're slipping away." Ethan forced a smile. "I'm right here." She reached out, holding his hand. "You were always my anchor," she whispered. "Promise me you won't disappear." The watch burned like fire. Ethan closed his eyes, fighting tears. "I promise," he lied. The next morning, Ethan woke up with blood on his pillow. Not much, just enough to terrify him. He stared at it for a long time before wiping it away. In the mirror, his eyes looked hollow, older, like someone who had lived too many lives too quickly. He pressed the watch. Nothing. He pressed harder. "Stop," he whispered. "Please." The watch ticked. The final fracture came quietly. Ethan stood in the living room as his mother prepared to go for a walk. Alone. Marcus hovered nervously. "You don't need us?" Ethan asked, forcing calm. She smiled. "I'll be fine." She stepped toward the door, then paused. She turned back to Ethan. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "I know you're important to me. I can feel it." Ethan's heart shattered. But sometimes, she continued, your face feels unfamiliar. Silence swallowed the room. Marcus stared at Ethan, horror dawning. Ethan couldn't breathe. The watch ticked, louder than ever. That night, Ethan sat alone, staring at childhood photos spread across the floor. Mom holding him as a baby. Mom teaching him to ride a bike. Mom laughing. Proof that he existed. Proof that he mattered. The man appeared one last time, standing behind him. She's alive, the man said. Isn't that what you wanted? Ethan's voice was barely sound. She's alive. Without me. The man's eyes softened, just slightly. You're reaching the end of what you can give. Ethan stood slowly. Then tell me this, he said, turning. When I'm gone, will she remember that she was loved? The man paused. That, he said, depends on what you do with the time you have left. Ethan looked at the watch. For the first time, he understood. Borrowing time wasn't about extending life. It was about choosing how someone lives after you're gone. And now, with pieces of himself slipping away, Ethan faced the hardest decision of all. Should he keep giving until nothing remained? Or reclaim what little time he had left, even if it meant losing her sooner? If saving someone meant erasing yourself from their life, would you keep giving until you vanished? Or would you finally stop before it was too late? Ethan stopped wearing the watch openly. He wrapped a bandage around his wrist, not to hide the object, but to hide the truth from himself, as if not seeing it might slow the quiet erosion happening inside him. It didn't. The days blurred together, stitched by fragments of moments he struggled to hold. Some mornings he woke up knowing exactly who he was. Other mornings, he woke up knowing only who he loved. And even that was slipping. His mother grew stronger. That was the cruel balance. She woke early now, made breakfast, stood by the window, and watched the city wake up. She spoke of plans, simple plans like walking in the park, visiting an old bookstore, cooking meals she hadn't cooked in years. Life had returned to her. Meanwhile, Ethan began writing things down. Names, memories, promises. He kept a notebook tucked into his jacket, filled with reminders written in shaky handwriting. You are Ethan Caldwell. You love your mother more than anything. You chose this. Sometimes he read the pages and felt nothing. Sometimes he cried. Marcus confronted him again, but this time without anger. They sat across from each other late at night, the city quiet beneath them. You're fading, Marcus said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. She's not. Marcus's jaw tightened. I would give everything I have, Marcus said, voice breaking, to trade places with you. Ethan looked at his father, really looked at him. For the first time, he saw not a titan of industry, not a distant provider, but a terrified man watching his family fracture. You already did, Ethan whispered. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? Ethan shook his head. I don't think I can explain it anymore. Marcus reached across the table, gripping Ethan's hand. Whatever you're carrying, Marcus said, you don't have to carry it alone. Ethan wanted to believe that, but some debts couldn't be shared. The watch ticked. The forgetting turned physical. Ethan stumbled more often. His hands shook when he tried to write. Sometimes words escaped him mid-sentence, leaving conversations unfinished and people confused. One afternoon, he collapsed in the hallway. His mother rushed to him, kneeling with fear in her eyes. Ethan, look at me. He stared up at her. She looked familiar, important, but her name. His chest tightened. His voice broke. I'm sorry. She pulled him into her arms. It's okay, she whispered, holding him tightly. You're safe. The watch burned so fiercely that tears streamed down his face, not from pain, from the unbearable realization that soon she would be the one comforting a stranger. That night, the man appeared without warning. No shadows, no riddles, just truth. You're close, the man said. Ethan laughed weakly. To what? The end. To understanding. Ethan looked up at him. Can I stop it? The man considered the question carefully. You can stop borrowing, he said, but time doesn't refund what's already spent. What happens if I stop? Her condition will resume its course. Ethan closed his eyes. And if I don't, you will finish paying. Silence filled the room. Ethan whispered, will I still be me at the end? The man didn't answer immediately. No, he said finally. The final straw came quietly, without drama. Ethan found his mother sitting at the dining table, flipping through old photo albums. She smiled up at him politely. Hello, she said. Something inside Ethan collapsed. Mom, he said softly. She tilted her head. I'm sorry. Have we met? The album slipped from his hands and hit the floor. Marcus rushed in. What's wrong? Ethan couldn't speak. His mother watched them both, confused and frightened. Marcus froze, understanding crashing into him like a wave. No, Marcus whispered. No, no, no. Ethan backed away slowly. This wasn't saving her. This was stealing himself. That night, Ethan made his decision. He sat by his mother's bed while she slept peacefully, alive, warm, breathing without struggle. He held her hand one last time. You won't remember me, he whispered, tears falling freely now, but you'll remember love. I hope that's enough. The watch pulsed. Ethan pressed it, not to borrow, but to stop. The ticking slowed. Somewhere deep within, something released its grip. By morning, his mother's condition subtly shifted. Nothing sudden, nothing cruel, just a gentle reminder that borrowed time always returns to its owner. Ethan felt clearer than he had in weeks, whole, but fragile. He had chosen to let go. Because love, he finally understood, wasn't about how long you could hold on. It was about knowing when to release without regret. As sunlight spilled across the room, Ethan stood at the window, watching his mother sleep, knowing the final chapter was approaching. And for the first time since pressing the button, he didn't ask for more time. He asked for meaning. If letting go is the purest form of love, then when the moment comes, would you have the courage to stop holding on, even if it meant breaking your own heart? Ethan woke before dawn. For once, his thoughts were clear. No gaps, no drifting, no borrowed memories pressing against the edges of his mind. The watch on his wrist was cold, silent. Whatever power it once held had finished its work, and so had he. The doctors spoke gently that morning. They used careful words, progression, comfort, days measured softly, not counted loudly. Marcus listened without interrupting, his hands folded, his face unreadable. When they finished, he nodded once, as if accepting a verdict he had long sensed but refused to name. Ethan stood by the window while they spoke. He didn't need explanations anymore. Time had resumed its natural pace, and oddly enough, that brought him peace. His mother was awake when he entered her room. She looked calm, present, not afraid. She smiled at him, not with recognition, but with warmth. "Good morning," she said kindly. "Good morning," Ethan replied. He pulled a chair closer to her bed and sat. They talked. About nothing important, about the weather, about how the city looked beautiful from the window, about how she felt lighter lately, as if something heavy had been lifted. Ethan listened. He didn't remind her who he was. Love didn't need labels anymore. Marcus watched them from the doorway. He saw how his wife's hand rested trustingly in Ethan's. He saw the quiet strength in his son's posture, the kind that came not from confidence, but from choice. Later, when his wife fell asleep, Marcus approached Ethan. "You knew," Marcus said quietly. "Didn't you?" Ethan nodded. "How long?" "Long enough." Marcus swallowed hard. "And you still—" "I'd do it again," Ethan said simply. Marcus's composure finally broke. He pulled his son into an embrace. Tight, desperate, real. "I didn't see you," Marcus whispered. "I was too busy building a future. I miss the present." Ethan held him. "You're here now." That afternoon, Ethan wrote one last thing in his notebook. Not reminders, not memories, a letter. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific, just words meant to exist beyond him. Love isn't measured in years. It's measured in moments willingly given. If someone lives fuller because of you, then you never truly disappear. He placed the notebook in Marcus's desk drawer and closed it gently. The final night was quiet. No machines, no alarms, just breathing. Ethan sat beside his mother, holding her hand as the city lights shimmered softly outside the window. She stirred. "You're kind," she whispered suddenly. Ethan leaned closer. "Why do you say that?" "Because I feel safe when you're here," she said, eyes still closed. "Whoever you are, thank you." Ethan smiled through tears. "Sleep," he said gently. And she did, peacefully. When the morning came, she was gone. Not suddenly, not painfully, just finished. Marcus stood still for a long time, his hand resting on his wife's, tears falling silently. Ethan stepped back, giving him space. There was no scream, no collapse, only the quiet understanding that borrowed time had returned home. Weeks passed. The world moved on. Marcus changed, slowly, deliberately. He stepped back from deals that didn't matter. He created a foundation in his wife's name, not for recognition, but for care. And Ethan? Ethan lived, not recklessly, not cautiously, intentionally. He volunteered. He listened. He stayed present. He didn't wear a watch anymore. He didn't need one. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, Ethan stood on the same street where it had all begun, outside the hospital. The man was there, waiting. "You paid in full," the man said. Ethan nodded. "I know." The man studied him. "Any regrets?" Ethan thought of his mother's smile, her strength, her peace. "No," he said, "only gratitude." The man smiled faintly and walked away, this time for good. Ethan looked at the sky, breathing deeply. He had borrowed time. But what he left behind was love, and that he realized was eternal. If love could outlive memory, outlast time, and remain even after you're gone, would you still choose to give everything you are for the people you love most? Drop your answer in the comments section. And if this story touched your soul, share, like, and kindly hit the subscription button on your screen. Stay safe.